Okay, so I'm a Christian. Everything should be easy, right? Let's talk about it. This is Bite Size Theology. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bite Size Theology, a ministry of Springfield First, where we tackle big topics around faith, one bite at a time. I'm your host, Allison Means, and today I'm joined by Justin Snyder as we talk about patience and perseverance when things are not going right.
So glad you brought me in for this topic, and I'm glad we have microphones here.
Yeah, only the easy ones for you.
Patience and perseverance when things are not going right. How many of us think that our lives, that we can design our lives in a way to no longer need patience? I mean, I sometimes think that.
That would be so nice, wouldn't it?
We try to do that. Like, I want to rid the need of patience in my life, and then we don't have to ever worry about these things. But of course, that doesn't happen.
No.
And that can be very hard for particularly newer people of faith who then run into struggle or run into hardship. And it's like, wait a minute, like I gave my heart to Jesus, I surrendered my life, or whatever language we use, and then we're running into some hard stuff.
Right. Shouldn't it be good now?
Shouldn't it be good now? Yeah. And so I think, the first place to begin is sometimes people will seek out a pastor when things are going rough, when those times of life are hard, where we need a lot of patience and perseverance. And I think pastors sometimes, with good intentions, are also a little bit anxious about those questions, and they want their flock to have lives of richness and meaning. And so oftentimes I think there is a quick result to easy prescriptions, like here's a list, here's some scriptures to read, kind of process this quickly, take these tips and trust in God, and then everything will be better. But rarely have I seen that to be actually helpful.
Right.
Especially if someone's really going through a hard time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times circumstances are not in your control, and it's not something necessarily that you can say, okay, this will be over in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't know.
I wish that were the case.
Right? It would be great if we could just schedule it.
Yeah.
This is my time for trials, and then we'll move on.
And let's face it, when we've had moments in our lives where things were hard, when things weren't going right, we don't really need people giving us, to-do lists or prescriptions or, hey, these simple tricks that I found on the internet will really help you out here. That's usually not what we need. And so I'm guessing other people don't either.
Yeah. If someone comes to you in that time, they're really going through something, like they want to be heard, they want compassion. Something that actually my husband and I have started doing is when the other person comes to us and clearly has something on their mind, we will ask each other, do you want to vent or do you want advice? So that we can give, the thing that's needed in that circumstance. Because if you're doing the other one when they, if you're giving advice when they just want to vent, that's going to cause, no one's feeling better at the end of that.
Sure. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that can be really important. And that right there, I think, sets up something I've thought about, that, man, perspective just changes so much when we come to things that require patience and perseverance. If we think of patience as something that, if patience is about being, then perseverance is about doing. And maybe if we can draw that distinction. So how do we walk into those times with patience? And I think our perspective, sometimes just a little bit of shifting of perspective can be very powerful if we're in a place where we can even think about it. So if there's hard stuff going on, I think I would just say, get with people who love you, find trusted conversation partners, rely on God as much as you can, whatever is possible there. Of course, that would include prayer. That would include the spiritual practices that you have found helpful prior to this time where you really are walking through patience. But if you get to a point where you are open for maybe some examination, then perspective just seems to be so helpful. That is, shifting perspective just ever so slightly so that we can see those times where we need patience from a longer term perspective, or from a perspective that doesn't have us at the center of everything. And I know that sounds harsh to say. It's because when we suffer, that's all we feel. That's our world closes in around us, and that's all we experience. So, but those shifts in perspective can be really helpful. There's a famous passage in Romans, and it sometimes is quoted, misquoted. There's a lot of people will cite this passage, but it comes in Romans 5. It's talking about what we have in Christ. And as a furthering of what there is in Christ, Paul writes, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame or disappoint us, as other translations say. Now, we have to be very careful in how we apply that passage, because that could come across as saying, hey, if you're going through a hard time, or if you're going through a period of darkness, or even like if someone's hurting you, hey, don't just think about the hope that's going to come when you stick it out. That's not what Paul means there.
Yeah.
But there are situations where scriptures like that help us shift our perspective to say, actually, could I see this from a perspective of growth? Like, what could God be wanting to teach me in this moment? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we only come to that after the fact. You know, we only do that in hindsight, where we go back and say, oh, that's what God was showing me. That's how I was growing in that time. And this thing came out of that. It's a lot harder to, in the moment, when you're in the thick of it, to find yourself in that place where you can say something else can come from this.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that in the back of your mind is a little comforting.
And that's what I'm thinking about, just that slight shift. For some, it might be a big shift, but just having that knowledge that what if right now this could be used for good in some way that I can't see right now, that my patience here could be used for good. And again, unless it's a situation where you really do need to remove yourself from, let's say if it's something of abuse or something of like true darkness and you can leave, I mean, that's what you have to do first. But if it's more of a season where I just need to persevere, then that helps shift the perspective to say, okay, what can we learn? And how will perseverance ultimately be seen as a blessing in my life? I'm not saying I'm good at that because I'm like a lot of us. I just want, when things get hard, I want to quickly make them better. I don't want to think in long terms. I want to be like, how soon can I get out of this so I don't have to be patient?
Right. I think like the human experience is like we want to avoid pain.
Yeah.
And so when you're in that, you know, in a painful situation, you know, physically, emotionally, spiritually, you want to find the easy answer, the easy exit from that situation, but there's not always one.
It's not always. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's hard. So when you find yourself in those situations, and if in the spirit of offering helpful advice, so take it for what it's worth, but I think talking to trusted people is so helpful. Finding who those people are in your life, whether they're close friends, trusted loved ones, pastors, counselors, somebody who you can go to and just express what's going on can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I cannot overstate how helpful it is to have a counselor or someone that has an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Because when you are in the muck and in the center of something, you're just not always capable of seeing everything that's going on. And that includes, you know, a way forward. Sometimes you cannot see it. But having people like a counselor or a pastor, people who are outside of the situation, who can bring that other perspective, I cannot overstate how valuable that is.
And there are some studies that show that just by speaking some things and kind of moving something from internal only in here to sharing, that in itself is worth a lot. That can actually be helpful apart from what someone else might speak to you. So I find encouragement in that too.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, that's one thing. I think another thing is be careful of either or thinking. Like, I think people get in the habit of saying, okay, this day is 100% bad or 100% good. Or if I have, that 1 out of 30 emails that is not so great, my day's ruined, everything's bad. It's black and white, it's either or.
Right.
Well, when we're talking about our lives, rarely are things always great, or rarely everything is always bad. And so we have to be careful about some of those catastrophizing thoughts, or how we're writing off large portions of our life just because we're dismayed by one point of suffering or whatever.
Right. That actually makes me think of, there's this saying, I don't remember, who said it, but it's every day may not be good, but there's good in every day.
Yeah.
So your whole day might not be the best day you've ever had, but like if you can look back and find something in that to be joyful about, to give you courage to continue on, that can help.
And that'll probably entail actually doing that, like actually taking the time to maybe shut down the phone, or turn off.
Journal or something.
Yeah, some kind of practice where you can call to mind the good.
Spend some time in prayer.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing I would say is that if God has us in a place where trusting God is our way forward, like if we have to actually walk through faith and with faith and patience during this time, then expect that God will meet you in that journey of walking with trust.
Yeah.
So if that's what God has for you right now, then there will be good that comes from you having to walk in trust during this time. Beyond that, we don't know, like God, the stories can twist and turn, and our lives sometimes really do feel like things are going around and around. But I think ultimately there are blessings that won't come unless we learn how to trust. And so that's what I would say anyway.
I think you're onto something there, Justin. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And that's all for this episode of Bite Size Theology. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Bite Size Theology, where we take big ideas about faith and break them down one bite at a time. We hope today's conversation has helped you grow in your understanding and sparked new insights on your journey of faith. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And as always, if you have questions or you want to dive deeper into today's topic, feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep growing.